and this lesson in various public schools around Lexington and Burlington in Massachusetts. But I think the topic and the content of it is relevant. It talks about the first connection of India to the US.
Yeah.
So to that extent it is relevant to all states, all the 50 states.
You think this is the first connection ever for trade between
US
yes. and India?
Yes, yes, from Salem. Yeah, that was the first ship
so
that went from.
This will be relevant to even California, because they probably never went to India. It's Massachusetts.
That's right. It was the trade got started soon after the US became independent.
Yeah.
So prior to that, because US was a colony too of the British, they had some restrictions on where the sailors could go, and they were not allowed to go to India and trade independently, as you know, because
before
of
independence.
Before US independence,
yes.
As you know, because of the British East India Company and the British rule in India. But it's only after US became independent in 1776 that the sailors became free to explore the world and go beyond places that they had not ventured out before. And so they started going to China, they started going to Manila, to the Philippines, to the Indonesian islands, and of course to India in 1788. That was the first ship that went there.
What kind of resources you had to find to write this book, and where did you get those?
So a lot of the resources are actually housed in the Phillips Library in Salem, which is part of the Peabody Essex Museum. And that's another interesting part. Maybe we can talk about the museum a little later. One interesting aspect about this trade is that this is the time before lighthouses were there.
Okay.
So every sailor was given a journal, and they had been asked to write about what they saw along the shoreline.
Okay.
So that those who were going after them could, you know, navigate the ports. But this is the power of the pen and the paper. When you get it, you start writing about your experiences. So the sailors who went to India with this journal wrote about their experiences, what they saw. It was completely new, the Indian subcontinent, the religion, the fruits. They had never seen the fruit mango. So there's a lot of mention of the mango, or the rivers there, the festivals there. So the sailors started writing these journals, and they have actually become a very important source material, primary source material for research. They are housed both at the Harvard Museum, the Harvard Houghton Library, the Salem Phillips Library, and the third source of my research was the National Archives in Waltham. They have actually very interesting original documents of all the ships that went. So that was the third place that I got a lot of material.
All the dates and people and number of people.
Yes.
How many people used to go on each of these ships?
It depends. About 15 to 25 people on each ship. Sometimes more. Some of the larger ships were.
And how long it used to take for them to get there?
The onward journey from here took about 119 days, 115 days, depending on the winds, and coming back took about 103 days. So a total round trip was about 218 days.
Wow.
So it almost was a year. If they, stopped on the way, did some trade, they stopped in India, did trade. So typically sailors were gone for a long time.
And you would imagine that they made good amount of money.
They made a lot of money. I want to tell you that Salem was the richest city, one of the richest cities at that time. Of the 6 largest cities in the US in 1780s, 1890s, Salem was one of them. And this is something that not many people know. So that's again how it is relevant for the whole country, that after New York, Baltimore, Boston, Carolinas, Salem was a very important part of this country's maritime and commercial enterprise.
Well, this is very important for this area, because we also hear that New Bedford was one of the, maybe 150 years ago or so, was one of the richest cities because of their whaling.
Yes.
Of course, maritime related, but a little bit different than that. So probably there may have been some connection. One of the connections I like to tell the audience is that the ship, one of the ship that actually those days was used by British East India Company, was named Dartmouth. And that was the first ship that when the Boston Tea Party, the first movement of independence in the United States occurred, that was actually the first ship that they threw the tea overboard, and that was named Dartmouth. And it used to be a ship that used to be owned by a family, I think it's Brock family, from New Bedford, and they were so much involved. So I have a feeling that maybe Salem and New Bedford can have there may be some connection between the two cities.
Sure. All along, actually, on the Massachusetts coastline, these small towns, Marblehead, Gloucester, New Bedford, all of them had good trading relationships. Salem at that time somehow was doing the largest in terms of volume and dollars earned. To give you an example, the first ship that went to Bombay, now Mumbai, was away for 3 years, and the captain was Mr. Derby Jr. He came back with a profit of over $100,000. Now in 1788, $100,000 profit is a lot of money, and he was the son of actually the first millionaire of the United States. So Salem also got, there are a number of firsts. So you know, the first U.S. millionaire is in Salem, comes from Salem, and the Derby family is, if you visit Salem today, you could see this Derby wharf. You can still walk down that wharf. You can see a lot of businesses named after the Derby family.
What did they trade?
They took mostly from here. Actually, another interesting fact, they took mostly things that were used for the British colonial use. These
from
were
here to
from
the British people in
yes,
in
the British officers in India. As you can imagine, the goods that the US had at that time, woolens, dried meats, rum, cheese, these were not something that Indians used at that time. So they mostly took those, but the largest component of the trade was actually hard currency. They took silver coins from here, that is money basically, to buy goods in India. And they bought mostly spices, textiles, some other art and tea and sugar, and they brought those back. So actually it was mostly money from here and goods from there. But textiles was the largest component of that.
So what are some other interesting facts that you have found during this research or in the book?
So like I said, you know, the first millionaire came out of this trade. The first surviving museum comes out of this trade.
Oh, really?
And that is how that happened, was that when these sailors went to India, they used the local Indians to help them complete the trade. These were called the trading agents. So they were big names from India, like the Vardias and the Ghoshes in Calcutta, very common names that were helping them complete the trade. And as Indians are, people are very warm and generous, they would give them gifts on the way back. And most of these gifts were art pieces. So paintings, statues, some religious items, and these were brought back from India as they brought art from other parts. So the sailors, after some time, you know, decided that they would actually start a museum, and they rented a place and they started the museum to show these what they called curiosities, because they really didn't understand them very well. And then after some time they did fundraising just like we do today, and the first East India Marine Hall was created in 1824, and that has become the oldest surviving museum. It has gone different, you know, it's expanded and new names have come to it. Today it is known as the Peabody Essex Museum. But again, that's an interesting fact about this trade.
Some of the old artifacts are still there?
Yes, all the artifacts from this trade are housed in the Peabody Essex Museum. And as the book shows, a number of them, the paintings. I see here. And even here you can see, you know, this is Lord Ganesh, a statue. And obviously somebody in India told them that this is a god of beginnings. So they placed this statue on the doorway. And the hall was, as I said, named East India Marine Hall, and that name is still there on the outside facade of the museum. You can still see it. So it's quite interesting. Yeah,
this book has quite a bit of pictures. Some of them, of course, are from here.